Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Neil Everatt.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Dan. Thank you, mate. Good morning, everybody. In true Donald Trump style, I can be fact-checked this morning because one of my former colleagues is actually in the room, so everything you'll hear today or see today is actually true. I did wonder about the title this morning. The end game sounds a bit morbid, doesn't it? But the reality is, there's two reasons why that title's there. When you do have a successful moment in your life and you do take some cash, one of the first questions you get asked by your wealth manager is, when are you going to die? Because they need to work backwards as to how you're going to use your money. The second question is, when are you going to lose your mobility? Because it's no great having cash, but if you can't go anywhere with it, go on holiday, then you're in trouble there as well. The other reason behind the title, and I kind of reflected a little bit on this, is that the end game really applies to people like shareholders, business owners. And I thought, is that relevant to everybody in the room? Maybe it isn't. But then I thought, hang on though, that's exactly how we all start out as employees. We're an employee first, and then we tend to work through to get to a place where you've engineered your outcome. So, who is this geezer? Always like to start off with something simple. I would, like most people in this room, had a number of jobs around the world. Very lucky in Lincolnshire, but had the chance to travel. Loved every minute of it. A local guy ran a company called Software Europe, which was based on Doddington Road, and he had about 12 employees. He was in his 60s, he wanted to retire. He asked me if I'd run his business for him, and I took the opportunity with glee. I became the managing director of a company of 12 people, and we had some really cool online technology at the time. This was in 2008. We had apps for employee expenses and all that kind of thing. So it was a really exciting space to be. And the business grew. And as it grew, I said to Peter, look, this is growing really well, but what's in it for me? So we discussed a little bit of a share ownership model. And it meant that I'd get one share every couple of years in the business if we were successful. And I thought, well, that's a good start. We'll start with that. And it went well. The business continued to grow. And I realized one share every couple of years isn't really going to do it for me. So we then managed to persuade him to complete a management buyout. In the middle of a financial crisis, we managed to raise a few million quid and get Peter out of the equation. And Peter's a lovely guy and a lovely friend, by the way, so I wouldn't hear anything against that. But we managed to do an MBO. And then we continued to grow, and we decided to change our name, and Lewis, you're a big part of that. We changed to Serenity, rebranded, and if you saw us on the football shirts at Lincoln City Football Club in the stands, it was a phenomenal moment, and I'll cover that in a second. But that was a story there. And then, of course, COVID came. We decided to start another business called Colleague Box, and I'll cover that again in a second. And then ultimately, my qualification is a CSE in woodwork. That's all I managed to do at school. But I believe in being really nice, a great employer, and I'll cover some of that in a second. I want to start off with the end bit, right? What is it like to set yourself an objective and to hit that objective when that transaction happens? I'm not big on these memes or whatever you call them, but I did read this a few years ago, and I just thought, how relevant is that to put the effort in right now to achieve something better at the end of it? And I wouldn't say we printed that on the wall and said this is our objective, but it kind of resonated quite well with me. So I thought, well, okay, we'll stick with that. This is what happened. Middle of lockdown it was. Or we were actually coming out of it. It's June 2020. And I get this call from a guy called Dan Taylor. And Dan is the sales director of a company called Allocate Software. Allocate were one of our biggest competitors. Their software was crap, by the way, but ours was great. So I kind of was pleasantly surprised to hear from Dan. And Dan said, would you be interested in talking to us? And I learned very quickly that is code for actually we're thinking about, would you be interested in letting us buy you? And you know what, we're in the middle of COVID, the economy's in a wobbly place, let's engage. And so the process then begins. Now it's quite interesting because we're in COVID, most people are still working from home. And we had to do quite a few meetings online with these potential buyers. And bear in mind, they haven't said they're going to buy us yet. They just want to do some initial meetings. And because people are working from home, we could actually host them in the office, 2 meters distance, of course. But because no one was in the office, there was nothing suspicious. But suddenly these people walking through the office, nobody was actually suspicious about who they were. So we continued with this little process. If you talk about valuing your business, there's a few metrics that you hear about. They'll look at your EBITDA, which is kind of like the pure number of your business value. There's ARR, which is annual recurring revenues, and people will value on a number of ARRs. And then there's this cheeky one I liked, which was called the off-balance sheet value. And this one is where you've got a value to them that isn't necessarily financial, but adds a financial fee to you. And for us, we had managed to penetrate some really cool markets. We had the NHS was one of our major customers. And so our off-balance sheet value wasn't just the value of the ARR, it was actually the value of that plus what they felt they could achieve. Because they felt that by buying us, they'll get instant access to a huge market. And so that was pretty cool. The other way of looking at your business decision is if they do give you an offer, how will it be paid? So there's cash up front, there's an exit. There's a cash up front, there's an earn out, or was a bit of both. In our circumstances, when we got the offer through, it was a 90% cash up front and with 2 exit points based on the sales revenue continuing and the efficiencies. And the efficiencies, I'm sorry to say, is the horrible one if you're a HR person, because that means it's people, unfortunately, but that is the reality. So we got to the point of having numerous meetings and they say, okay, we're going to send you an exclusivity agreement and an initial offer. At that point, there's 3 or 4 skills you need: advisors, lawyers, tax specialists, and negotiators. So this is your business, this is your life. We chose a company called KPMG. There are other good organizations out there to do everything for us. We wanted everything under one roof, and so we engaged with KPMG. I will say KPMG are not the cheapest advisors in the world, so bear that in mind. The storm, it becomes relentless. So we're now into 2020. We've come out of lockdown, but we're in restrictions. We're heading towards the winter time where we think COVID is going to come back again and we're going to go back into restrictions, and we're trying to perform a due diligence process. The due diligence is exactly that. They want to know everything, and they open a data room and then they ask you to put all your data in there, your financial accounts, the whole lot. At this point, there are some key people in your company that you need on board. We wanted to keep everything confidential. For obvious reasons, you don't want people knowing what's going on until actually it might happen. So only the 4 major shareholders knew the situation. We needed one more person on board, and that was our financial director. And Jono, great guy, we brought him on board and offered him a bonus to make sure that he would see this through and would see something at the end of it if it happened. We negotiated the sales conditions, the terms. It wasn't that bad, actually. I think when you get to a professional level like this, there's a give and take that we all are kind of expecting a sales transaction. But that's the way that story went. And the good thing is, but the bad thing is, the deal can collapse at any time. So at no time did I go, oh my God, I better contact Ferrari or whatever your car is. You daren't do that because this transaction could fail at any particular moment. Now, my wife's at home and I'm sure obviously telling her, and she's getting a bit excited. I'm saying it really could go at any time. And I'll show you why in a second. My son also worked for the company, and the golden rule I had was I would not share anything confidential with my son. So he had no idea. He was living at home at the time. He actually moved out into a house shortly afterwards, but he had no idea what was going on, that the company he worked for and his dad had shares in was under a transaction. Can I talk to you about lockdown 1? So colleague box was a bit weird, really. So I was, one of the things I love doing, and Lewis, back me up on this, please, but I loved going to the office on a normal day, and you could walk through the rooms and you could say hi to people and you could ask them how they had a good evening, how they had some lovely wine, how the kids get on at football. It was a very sociable company, and I absolutely missed that when I was sat in the conservatory at home on my own. And the conservatory was a great idea in spring, but God, it was a crap idea in the summer. It was so hot. But I sat there and thought, how am I going to engage with my colleagues? I used to love talking to them, meeting them. What can we do? So I thought I'd go on Amazon. And we had 75 employees at the time. I get 75 gifts sent to everybody, easy. Well, with GDPR and all that kind of stuff, it's not that easy. So I thought, well, okay, we'll do it ourselves then. So I bought these little boxes and we put things in them. And I sent a demo copy to my colleague, Deborah Sawnby. And I posted it through a letterbox and said, Deb, what do you think of this idea for everybody? And she rang me up and she said, God, Neil, that is shit. She said, who the hell wants a packet of top trumps? And I said, well, I thought it was a good idea. And some biscuits. I said, no, okay. So we revised the whole thing and then actually put it into a box and thought, oh, okay, this is a bit better. I soon learned, though, that packing boxes and putting stuff in them isn't my forte. So fortunately or unfortunately, 2 of my colleagues, Adam and Natalie, who were on furlough at the time, I asked them if they'd be interested in coming back and trying to make this business work. And we posted these boxes out to our colleagues. And of course, one of the things that your colleagues do straight away is they put it on social media. And they go, oh, this is my company's great. And then Lincoln City Football Club, Liam Scully said, oh, I love this idea, Neil. Can you do some boxes for us? And there it moved and it moved and it moved. And it hit £1 million in 5 months in turnover. Now, it wasn't a very profitable £1 million because when you're starting a business from zero and you need a forklift truck and you need a warehouse, things get really expensive, right? But it did hit £1 million. I have to tell you the story of this one. You may have seen it already, but we had a call from DPD, the delivery company, and they wanted us to send a gift to every single one of their drivers. And it was coming up to Halloween, and we said, okay, what do you want to do? So they said, well, we want a pumpkin in a box with a carving kit, and we're a web address, and they can do the carving, and they can submit their picture, and the best cut pumpkin wins. And we said, yeah, okay, that sounds good. How many are you talking? 22,000 pumpkins. Fucking hell. Now, we're in sales, aren't we? We're in sales, so we go, yeah, no problem. Fortunately, I had a good friend called Pat Doody, who some of you may know. He was a NatWest director of the area at one time. He'd retired, but I rang Pat, and I said, Pat, mate, you've got to help me out, mate. I need 22,000 pumpkins. And he said, I know just the guy. Farmer in Boston. And sure enough, that is the startup story of Colleague Box, which is still going well today. It's had to morph a bit because, of course, we're not working from home anymore. It's now become a gifting company, but it's an interesting story, and Natalie and Adam still run that organisation. So, the end game. So this was, the lawyers tell you that we've gone through the process. The CEO of the company that's buying us has been to Lincoln. We had dinner at the Reform restaurant, and I said to him, I was with Deb, my colleague, and there's two of them, and I said, the number you've offered us is really good. No, I didn't say that. I said, it's okay. I said, but if you start nibbling away at that number, I don't think the transaction is going to happen because each of my shareholders now has an expectation. And Nick turned to me and he said, Neil, I think we're going to be okay. And that to me then was an interesting moment. It's not a moment where I thought this transaction is going to happen, but it still meant that we're on the right track. The offer had been made, and it was a multi-million pound transaction, just to give you a scale of that. The lawyers had gone through the paperwork and they said, okay, we want the transaction closed off by the 1st of October. And on the day before, they said, oh, we can start signing the contracts. We'll start signing about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, should be done by tea time. Bullshit. At 2 a.m., we're still signing agreements. And to give you a scale again, there are 80 plus contracts. The company by that time had been 20 odd years old. It had accrued a lot of financial data, liabilities, assets, that kind of thing. But we signed 80 contracts, and then I went to bed at 2 in the morning, told my wife it's all done. And I don't know, there wasn't a moment where you thought, oh, great, this is fantastic, let's ring Ferrari or anything like that, because you've then got the wall of change that's about to happen. You've just sold your company that you've been part of for, I think it was there 12 years, that you lived and breathed, that you put so much energy and effort into. We had to make announcements, and because of the restrictions, we had to go live on video, and it was 600 employees, plus the 75 colleagues that I had from Serenity. And they had no idea, although I suspect there were suspicions because suddenly putting a meeting in the diary for every person in the company at 11 o'clock in the morning was unusual, right? But we went live. It was probably my worst, and hopefully this isn't that, but my worst presentation I've ever done because your brains are muddled, right? Right now you're going through, I've just sold my company. I'm very conscious that my colleagues, who I'd love dearly, are now about to go through a change in their career potentially, and it could impact them. So there's all these emotions going on. We had an earn out, which is I agreed to stay on for 18 months. There was 2 financial reasons for that, as I mentioned before, but also I wanted to make sure the company's integrated properly if I could. And then this is the moment where I was getting text messages from my colleagues going, I've got my money, it's in the bank. Because you don't realise, you think, you're literally going to transfer cash to everybody by this 12 o'clock that day. And I've got a message from Deb, I got a message from Darren saying the money, and of course I'm still waiting. And then suddenly I get a screenshot from my wife to say, it's in, but you're still too knackered to realise what it actually really means. The fallout was, unfortunately, and Louis, you don't fall into this category, but immediately, of course, you're this guy that's run this company for 12 years, you've got a lot of trust in people, you've told them that we're going places, and then suddenly you're telling them that actually we've been bought by another company. It was really hard to do that, but it's a fact, how business works. I noticed I'd lost a few friends on Facebook, which is probably the saddest one of all, because I felt that we're all friends in this, but obviously people felt very emotional about that. Generally speaking, peers were happy for us. And then you think, oh, what am I going to do now? I've got 18 months. Do I go again or do I just enjoy life and do presentations like this? So post-contract signing, yeah, you're talking about internal announcements. You're aware of colleagues' press releases. And the Lincolnite, bless them, they're no longer here now, but were helpful in making companies aware, the businesses aware and colleagues aware of what was going on. and then we got onto the task of integrating the businesses. Was it luck? No. We set out to do this. We wanted to make a great business, grow fast, and be a great place to be. And I'm still really proud of how we did that. Flexibility. We discovered a whole new workforce in Lincoln of parents that could only work around school times. And so we found a task that we needed them to do, and they employed these people here. Time. This wasn't very successful, but it was an experiment. As a bloke, and I'm being a bit gender specific now, if you've got to get your hair cut, I had mine done yesterday, if you want to get your hair cut, tend to go on a Saturday morning when it's very precious time, and you sit there for an hour or two waiting for your hair to be cut. And we said, well, hang on a minute, would it be great if we could actually get the hairdresser to come to us? Colleagues could book in during their lunch hour, during their breaks or whatever, and then they've still got the whole weekend free. It was really hard to coordinate, but it was a brilliant social media stunt, so motivate. In that moment between Christmas and New Year, you're at home, it's been great. Then New Year comes and you start to feel a bit of a lull, and then maybe 2 days later you've got to go back to work. I don't care how great you are as an employer or as a company, it's still a bit of a low moment on a dark January morning, driving into the office, it's raining, it's snowing or whatever, and I wanted to know how can we lift people up a little bit? And I was walking down Lincoln High Street and there was a busker, and I waited him to finish his song and I asked him, would you be interested in coming to the office to welcome my colleagues back the first day? And he said, yeah, 80 quid. I thought, bloody hell, that's a bit of a rip-off, but anyway, we'll do it. So the first year we had a busker come, and I watched my colleagues, and as they walked in, they kind of smiled. It was stupid, it was a bit funky, but it made them smile. The second year we got a rock band with all the lights, and years 3 and 4, probably as a foodie, my most favourite, but we invited Darren Rogan, the fine dining chef, to come to the office and create some 4 or 5 dishes for everybody in the morning, and we'd hand them out, and again, people started smiling, and social media. We built this profile, this business, and it started to turn things because of all the social media noise. Suddenly, when we're trying to recruit, it's suddenly got a lot easier. People like what we're about. People were contacting us and saying, I like what you're doing, can I come and work for you guys? Health, I mean, this is quite common now, but in 2015, it wasn't. So we put fruit everywhere for people to enjoy. Why wouldn't you want a healthy employee? Obviously. Inclusive events, big fans of the Lincoln City Football Club. In fact, we've still got a box there now, box 5, if anybody wants to come and join us, and communicate everything twice. We would go into the office every Sunday morning and record a video about what had happened the week before and what was going to happen the week ahead. I mean, even though we did that, and then we put it out on our private channel called Workplace, and most people viewed it, but you still got questions about, I didn't hear that, I didn't see that, I didn't know that, but it worked quite well. It's a very, very effective communication tool. Getting sale ready or investor ready. Right, really urge you. In fact, I'm going to start with the bottom one. If you're ever tempted to skimp on something, don't. When you're going through the due diligence process, they want to know absolutely everything. If you've got an error in your accounts, they will find it. So get excellent records. And make sure your articles of association are geared up for what you want to try and achieve, that you've got shareholders in the right place. We had an issue which was spotted 2 years before our transaction. There's the way the shares were classified in the articles of association. And so fortunately, we had to make time to make the change, but these changes sometimes take 2 years to be acknowledged by HMRC as changes. So again, if you know what your outcome is, get your records straight, make sure you're actually in the right place in terms of paperwork to do the transaction that you want to do. I love this one. So our competitors, ironically, the competitors that bought us in the end were having a conference in Birmingham. They were a lot bigger than us. They had 600 employees. They were called Allocate Software. They're big in the NHS. And they tried to build a piece of software that was like ours, but it was rubbish. And we were quite happy to share that, obviously being polite. But they held a conference in Birmingham, and we thought, wouldn't it be cool if we hire a van and park up outside the conference and tell their colleagues, their visitors that, hey, some better software here, guys, if you want to talk to us. And that was kind of the fun stuff. So that was good. Now decide who might buy you. You probably know you've got competitors that might buy you. You've got a trade sale potentially. And then when is the right time? Really hard, isn't it? For us, Brexit was there, the COVID was there, the economy, and bear in mind we were doing online expenses technology, and at the time no one was traveling. It's not a great space to be in. So we thought, okay, this is a really good time for us. How much do your shareholders want? So I was really keen not to be greedy, although initially I took all the shares and I held them and then decided how they will be distributed. And I had my 4 main shareholders, And then we had a number of other shareholders along the way. But even though you've got tag and drag in your shareholder agreements, which means that you can say, we're doing this transaction, you're coming with me whether you like it or not, that doesn't feel like the right thing to do for a business. So we wanted to find out what all the shareholders' expectations were. This was way in advance of selling. And we were going to hire a helicopter and fly to, there's a hotel just outside Grimsby. And it's got a helipad, but it was too expensive, so we drove there in the end. But the point was, we went to this hotel and had a shareholder meeting where I asked the guys, Deb, Darren, I said, what are your expectations? And of course they go, oh, I want 50 million out of this. And you go, okay, well, to get 50 million, your business needs to be up there. And I said, we're quite small still at the moment, but you know, we can work towards that. But it was a really interesting point because at that point, people started really thinking about what they wanted out of the transaction. So by the time the transaction came, there was some much more realistic expectations about what they would take. Key personnel, I've mentioned that to you. Who's on the investor team? We chose 2 people. That was myself and my colleague Deb Sawnby. Deb was our sales director who knew her sales numbers inside out. And hopefully I complemented that with the business knowledge, how the company was operating. And that was the 2 teams that we stuck to. And we would visit investors all through the London mainly, unfortunately, that's where it seems to be. You see, the thing is, we didn't know we wanted to sell. We knew we wanted to change gear, if you like. And that changing gear could be selling. It also could be taking investment. So we started contacting investors in London and saying, would you talk to us? And of course, they're delighted. They're fantastic. Yeah, come and have a look. And what that does then, it starts to make some noise in the world of investment, that these guys are looking for investors. And that just grows your profile again. I call this luxury preparation because in preparing for a good exit, for making your business grow, there are a number of things that you can do. And these are, I think, the top end. There are awards like you're doing tonight, for example. They were great for us. We actually loved doing them. And then there was the football sponsorship. And again, as I mentioned, this one here, to sponsor Lincoln City Football Club and the shirt was a lot of money. But it was costing us £10,000 a time to recruit a good technical person. So if we could flip it where people were coming to us and saying, I like what you're about, and we could save £10,000, it soon recovers your sponsorship. It's a bit of an investment, but it kind of worked for us. Connecting, the investor deck's really important, and I would urge you to have that ready any time. It's part of who are you anyway, so it's kind of easy to keep up to speed. Announce every win. You know, confidentiality sometimes means that you can't say you've just won exactly the name of the customer, but you can announce that you won a customer in a certain sector, and we did that relentlessly. And the second thing that we always did, when we brought a new customer on board and they signed a contract, I'd get the name off the contract and I'd connect them on LinkedIn and say thank you. Because often the person that signed the contract maybe had nothing to do with the transaction, but they were the senior person in the organisation who was able to sign off £1 million contract, for example. So again, something that made life a bit easier, got the noise out there. Yeah, I've talked about these already. Signing NDAs, pretty important. Never had that backfire yet. And there's well-connected advisors. Again, they cost a lot of money, but not until you go for a transaction. They work for nothing until the transaction happens. So a bit of a test. What buyers, investors like, and I appreciate that not everybody's on this track, but this is the fact that they love subscription pricing. They love recurring revenue streams. In our world, we were able to get multi-year contracts from the public sector. That was them committing to paying X per year, every year for 5 years. You can imagine what that does to your deferred revenues. When someone comes to buy you and you can show them that you've got £20 million of deferred revenues, they probably know this is a pretty safe bet. A reliance on 1 or 2 people for the business, you probably know the answer to this one. Probably not great. They want to make sure that they can run the business without you if they need to. Numbers are clear and concise. Absolutely, why would you not? Vision for the business, yeah, we had a vision for where it was going to go. Did they adopt it? Not necessarily, but nonetheless, they knew that where we were aiming for. Any outstanding legal, financial obligations? They're not major problem, but I don't, just make sure that they will ask questions about those. This one's really interesting. And it's really hard to get out of. If you're signing contracts with new customers, often there's a change of ownership. So if you do get bought, they can cancel the contract straight away. And we've tried really hard to make sure those terms didn't reach our contracts. It wasn't always possible. And then long-term customer contract, absolutely. Blitz in performance, not a problem, as long as you can explain them. So summary, prepare now and get your business in good shape. Consider what a good exit looks like, whether you're sat there now as a single person in a single company. What does it look like? What could I do? Make a lot of noise. The old phrase, have fun. I hope that's a hopeful start to you. Thank you. I'm 3 minutes early as well. Very happy to take any questions. There is a phrase, and I should point out, I think it's in the literature, that says we created 5 millionaires. It is absolutely true, but one of the things I would say to you, you never create on your own. You need a great team behind you to create that output. And also, it's not about money. It helps, but it's about the journey along the way as well. So it's not always money focused, but that is hopefully useful information for you. Thank you.